Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shenanigans with Shreya podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about the placebo effect, about manifestation, about the belief of your own thoughts. Now, the reason why this episode came up for me was I was genuinely just thinking about the placebo effect in general, how literal research, even now with clinical trials or any study being done, they have to factor in the placebo effect because they can't tell the participant if the medicine that they're taking for this clinical trial is real or not, because that has been shown to switch the way that a participant believes. There have been times when a participant has actually taken nothing, so like it's a placebo, and they still believe that they feel better. And I found that so interesting from a biological brain perspective. And I wanted to deep dive into this because, in a way, and I'm a huge believer of manifestation for this reason as well, it's that your brain will literally believe what it's being told. Like it will start rewiring based on the thoughts that you're telling it, which I found so interesting. So, we are in 2026, we are seeing this shift in how we understand the human body now. We are able to look at our DNA much more closely, and we can actually ask that, hey, can a literal electrical impulse from a neuron recode our DNA? Is placebo actually just manifestation that your brain is literally just thinking different? So today we are going to go a little bit beyond the surface, dive a bit deeper. We are going to be talking about quantum biology, biophoton emission, and neuroplasticity on a cellular level. So this is the Biology of Belief episode. Now, first, we're going to talk about how a literal thought can become part of your physical brain. So you might have come across the term before of long-term potentiation. Every time you have a thought or every time you learn something specifically, learning has been shown to strengthen the bonds and the connections of your neurons to each other. So you can think of it like, a road that keeps getting a lot of good, like strong concrete on it and isn't being eroded. Because what happens is that if you don't activate certain neuron pathways for too long, the road starts to erode essentially. So it looks like the road is still there, but there's so many like potholes in it. The connection isn't as strong. It's a barely used, dusty road. Whereas in long-term potentiation, when you keep having a specific belief over and over again, so for example, I am a high performer, I am lucky, whatever it is that, positive affirmations are, you are firing a specific sequence of neurons and that will trigger long-term potentiation. So that is when the connection between two neurons becomes stronger based on how frequently you activate it. So what this also means in a more literal sense is that you are physically increasing the amount of receptors that are there on those neurons. But what's really interesting, and this is where manifestation essentially ties in, is when you visualize something or when you affirm something, you are essentially forcing those specific circuits to fire again and again. So you are wiring your brain to a reality that hasn't happened yet, but your brain believes that it will happen or is going to happen soon because you're intentionally firing those circuits. So by the time the specific opportunity arises, which in a lot of cases can be really just a presentation tomorrow, even for a lot of athletes, and we spoke about this in the Olympic episode, that they visualize themselves in that race, in that stadium over and over again, because by the time that the opportunity arrives, your brain has already built in how to handle the situation, how to handle the environment that it's in. So you aren't really wishing at that point, you're just activating and initiating the hardware response of your body. You're initiating your brain to visualize this. You're just like visualizing your reality because you know it's going to happen. Now, let's go into the more cellular basis of this. So this is where we're going to talk about manifestation and placebo on a more molecular level. So every cell in your body has a covering around it called the cell membrane. You might remember it from school. And this cell membrane is covered in a lot, like thousands of integral membrane proteins, okay? Stay with me here. So think of it as a covering, and this covering is made up of a lot of proteins, understandably, because our body is made up of a lot of proteins. Now, these proteins, they act as the cell's moving system. Like they direct the cell, they will pick up on anything in the environment next to the cell. They're like the antennas of the cell, essentially. So these proteins pick up signals from the environment, specifically the chemicals created by your own thoughts. So again, all this neuroplasticity happening in your brain, your cells are going to pick up on the changes that are happening. So when you're in a state of just high stress all the time, you are in the state of nocebo, which means constant negativity, your brain floods with a a lot of adrenaline, a lot of cortisol because you're stressed. That's what happens to your body. And these chemicals will then be identified by the protein antennas in our cells and trigger something in the cell called signal transduction. What that means is that this signal that, oh my God, our body is under a lot of stress, there's a lot of cortisol and adrenaline in the blood, this is going to travel all the way into the nucleus of the cell, and it'll basically tell your DNA that, oh my God, we are under attack at the moment. You need to shut down growth, shut down the immune system, and prepare for war. Like, that is literally what is happening when your body is being told that it's under high stress. Conversely, what's interesting is when you're manifesting, there is a state of peace and abundance that floods the body with a lot of growth hormones and dopamine. And dopamine is one of those chemicals that signals to your DNA to turn on the genes for cellular repair and cognitive expansion. And you are literally programming your genes to work for you to actually improve your health and well-being. So coming back to the placebo effect in pharmacology, in 2026, we've kind of moved past the idea that placebo is fake because it has been proven again and again in a lot of clinical trials that it is very much present. So we can call it endogenous pharmacology. Again, I know these are like big words and big statements, but stay with me. We're going to break it down. So when you believe that you are healing, which can happen even if you take a placebo medication, as we discussed, the person might think that, oh my God, I've taken the actual medication and now I'm going to be better. That automatically activates your prefrontal cortex, which is the decision-making part of your brain. And that activates the PAG, it's just another part of your brain. And this is where your brain has its own internal opioid factory, basically. So fun fact for those of us who might not know that opioids, you can get them externally. You might have heard of like the drug versions, but you do have internal opioids. Like, your body can make your own endogenous or in your body opioids. So the result is that when you believe you're healing, your periaqueductal gray, your PAG, is activated and your brain's internal opioid factory starts to activate. And what happens with this is that your brain produces essentially its own morphine, its own anti-inflammatories, and its own antidepressants. So the reason why manifestation works for high performers is because they are constantly triggering that dopamine reward loop even before they win. So the dopamine is essentially just making them feel better. It also helps the brain increase the pattern recognition that you have. So it makes your brain physically sharper at trying to do the best in that situation. So in a competition, for example, in visualization, athletes are guided to visualize every little thing. So, what'll happen if you trip up somewhere? What'll happen if this goes wrong, that goes wrong? Like, you are mentally preparing yourself for every possible outcome. And in a way, it makes your brain physically sharper at being able to figure out how to overcome these obstacles to reach your success. So again, you are essentially being drugged internally for your success. Now, another really interesting thing that I came across, and it's quite new to me actually, is biophoton emission. So every living cell does emit light particles called biophotons, understandably because we're not a black hole. We're not devoid of light. We do have bits of light inside, even though it's covered by the skin, it's covered by everything, but there are biophotons in our body. And right now, actually, researchers are exploring the theory that these light emissions are part of a global cellular communication system. They think that this is how cells communicate with one another, by emitting light at certain frequencies. So when you focus your intention or your manifestation, you are essentially creating coherence in your bioelectrical field. So we call this stochastic resonance. So it essentially means that by aligning your thoughts, which again, we've discussed are electrical signals in your body, and by aligning your emotions, you can create an electromagnetic signature that changes how your nervous system interacts with the world. So this is why a lot of people, you might have heard, and I say this myself as well, it's like the energy of people, the energy shifted. So it's really not magic at that point. It's just your like bioelectrical coherence. You are shifting from a quote unquote like chaotic frequency, which can be a lot of anxiety, a lot of doubt, and you're shifting from that frequency to a coherent frequency, which is more certainty, more belief. So your brain literally functions better in a state of coherence just because it's more calm. There's not as much adrenaline or cortisol in that state of coherence. Now, I know we've covered a lot from long-term potentiation to cellular coherence, and the conclusion is kind of simple. It's just that your brain is amazing. It's the most sophisticated manifestation tool that is known in the universe, but it also requires a manual. And I know like manifestation gets this bad rep of being like really woo-woo, but I think it's really important to look at the signs of whatever you believe in, and even before passing judgment, because sometimes, I mean, the people might not be the most efficient in portraying or translating that information. Manifestation really is just neuroscience, but it is really fascinating when you look deeper and see that it works so well and it makes so much sense. And things like visualization, athletes have been doing that for decades. So I wanted to include a little protocol or just, a routine, a few tips that can help you understand how manifestation might work for you a bit better. So number one is the morning recode. So before you check your phone, it's good to spend 10 minutes just visualizing your win until you feel the dopamine hit from your visualization. You're essentially filling your body with dopamine before your day starts, which is quite nice. Number two is the nocebo audit. So when you catch a negative thought, it's important to actually acknowledge it and not just ignore it. Acknowledge it, but rephrase it so that that negativity doesn't stick with you. So it's important to lean into the idea of thinking positively because it will help you and your mind so much more than you know. Last tip is create some coherence. So use deep rhythmic breathing to move your heart into coherence. Something that I have learned and has been proven correct time and time again for me is deep breathing will calm you at any moment. Even if you're at the most heightened excitedness or nervousness or whatever it is, you just breathe deeply and it will sort itself out. Even when people are having a panic attack, one of the first things that is recommended is that you breathe deeply because breathing centers you. And it's amazing that something as simple as the breath can hold so much power. I really do recommend using deep breathing to move yourself into a more centered state. And it also allows your prefrontal cortex to calm down a little bit. It allows you to stay more present. I also wanted to address the idea of spiritual crystals because I know people, and I know that this is a growing thing in media about having crystals that will, boost certain things. I mean, they're really pretty. Crystals are really pretty to look at, and some of us think that they might have magical elements to it. So as a scientist, I wanted to look at the material science of it. So crystals, by definition, have a perfectly ordered molecular lattice. So this is a state of maximum alignment in physics. And essentially, if you apply pressure to a quartz crystal, it will generate a measurable electrical charge, which is quite interesting. So, even your digital watch, your phone, your computer, they're all running on the stable frequency of silicon and quartz. So the science here is that your body is also bioelectrical. Your heart, your brain, your nervous system, we're always constantly emitting these frequencies. So when you hold a crystal, which is again a perfectly stable coherent structure, and you combine that with a focused intention, which is again going to cause bioelectrical signals to go into your body because your thoughts turn into electrical impulses. When you're holding that crystal and having an intention or a manifestation at the same time, you're engaging in something called sympathetic resonance. So it's like a tuning fork where you're using the physical stability of a crystal to help anchor the chaotic electrical signals that you might be feeling in a stressed out brain. You aren't really getting the power from the rock. You're just using the rock to stabilize your own frequency. So in a way, it's like this neural anchor or biofeedback. The question that arises is, why do we feel that it works? So this is where neuropsychology comes in. When you have a specific stone that you have assigned is for abundance or for peace, you're performing something called cognitive priming. And you're telling your reticular activating system that this object, this crystal represents my peace or represents my abundance and my love, whatever it is. And every time you see that crystal on your desk, it is going to trigger that sense of, oh my God, this is my peace crystal. This is my abundance crystal. And your brain, even if it's for a microsecond, it will have a flash of that feeling, that intention that you've projected onto this crystal, essentially. So the good thing is that you are essentially drip feeding your brain dopamine and oxytocin throughout the day just by having a crystal that you've assigned a meaning to. And again, this is where the placebo connection motivation comes in is because you believe that the crystal helps, your brain will stay active. Your brain will enter into this high performance mode because you have a reminder of this good intention, of this good affirmation or manifestation in a way. So you can think of it as magic because it is beautiful that you're able to use the earth's resources and use the power of your own mind to have this belief, to hack into your own psychology and your mind. So I would recommend, just for like a little bit of a dopamine boost. I don't have any crystals personally, but I think they're really pretty to look at, and I probably would like some to decorate my desk. But I think if it's giving you positivity, if it's giving you a good vibe, it's always good to have it. You know what I mean? So does it matter if the crystal has powers at that point? Because scientifically, power is mainly from the brain and your intention. So if a piece of rose quartz is going to make you breathe deeper and trigger your parasympathetic nervous system, which is meant for calming down, then it's great because, your crystal is working at that point and it's a tool for self-directed biological transformation in a way. Self-directed mindfulness, really. A little thing that you can do is find an object. It can be a crystal, it can be anything else, it can be a lucky bracelet. That is the whole point of having a lucky whatever, because you are attaching that belief of luck and success to an object. But yeah, find an object, whether it's a crystal, whether it's anything else, and give it a specific intention. Code it with this specific neural goal. It can be, I'm going to have a great day today. I'm going to be abundant. I'm going to have the luckiest day. I'm the luckiest person, whatever it is. And when you're stressed, or when you feel like you need a bit of an energetic boost, hold it, look at it, focus on the stability that this object is giving you, that it's here with you, and then use it to pull your brain out of whatever stress or fear that you're holding in your amygdala and just take your power back. So remember that this crystal or this object is really just a key and a tool. The main chemistry and the main reason why it's working is because your brain is there. So yeah, anyways, we have covered DNA, we've covered long-term potentiation, we've covered crystals. I hope that was an interesting episode. I've had a great time recording this one because it's just fascinating to see how these things with manifestation and crystals intersect and interact with our own world. So thank you so much for listening, guys. I hope you take something useful from this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.